There we go. Okay. All right. Hey, good afternoon, guys. All right, so I'm having to use the slides on my phone just because my daughter is in Zoom meetings and I've got stuff going on here too. So anyway, this is to go over, and again, your number in your notes is different than the page number that I have. I don't really remember the exact number that you should be on by now, but it should be talking about Kennedy and the Cold War. Your Kennedy and the Cold War review sheet goes along with these notes, and we'll do section 1 stuff today. And I'll post everything from the Zoom meeting that I have at 3. Alright, so the 1960 election was a really exciting one. So the new kid on the block, and everybody pretty much called him this because he is the youngest elected president. He's not the youngest president, because the youngest president we've ever had is Theodore Roosevelt. But remember, he becomes president kind of by default because McKinley's assassinated and he's the guy that gets, quote, kicked upstairs, right? So Kennedy is the youngest elected president, and the 1960 election was a really big deal because this is going to be the very first televised debate. So it's making history for a lot of reasons. The economy was really good in the 1950s. Obviously, the scary thing is our economy is like a roller coaster, and it's been up for a while and it's about to come down. And of course, no president wants to be there when it comes down. But we're not even going to talk about the economy right now. So here's who we have. We have JFK, who is the Democrat running for office. He's a young guy. He's got a young family. He's got Caroline and John Jr. are his 2 children, and I think when they come into the White House, they're the ages of, I want to say 7 and 3 sounds about right. Maybe 8 and 4. I don't know, somewhere around there. And then his wife Jackie. So they're a really young family, and everybody's really excited about them to come in. But here's another big first. And this goes along with your bell ringer question, is we had never had a Catholic president before. And I know today we're like, why is that a big deal? But it really was. In a very traditional Christian-based society, we had never had a Catholic president before, which kind of makes me think of the election. And I'm trying to think, I want to say it was the 2012 election that had Obama running for his 2nd term in office against Mitt Romney, who is a Mormon. And that was a really big deal because if Mitt Romney had won, we'd never had a Mormon president before. So for the 1960s, this really was a big deal that he was going to be our first Catholic president. Alright, so first televised debate, and a lot of people will say because it was televised, that's the reason why Kennedy won over Nixon. Everybody associates Nixon with the Eisenhower years because Nixon was VP for Eisenhower. The 1950s, with the exception of Cold War, with the exception of segregation, for the most part, it was good times. So everybody associates our good economic times and good feelings and good vibes with Nixon. So it was a really close election, but in the end, Kennedy pulls it out. And like I said, a lot of people will attribute that to Kennedy looking so much better than Nixon on the televised debate. So again, I've got the slideshow on my phone, and I know it's kind of hard to see on your PowerPoint, but Nixon, everybody said he looked really sick. He looked like he didn't feel good during the debate, which is what they say it's true, that he really wasn't feeling good. And another secret that will be on one of our review sheets is that Kennedy wore makeup to make himself look very calm and cool during the debate. And another picture that your slideshow shows you is the fact that when the televised debate was on TV, it was something that everybody watched. It was on every channel. Like there was only 3 channels. It was like 2, 8, and 12 or something like that. And if you turned the channel, the debate was on every channel. So it was very much a family affair. You know, you either did that or you went and read the newspaper or played with your toy cars or something, you know. Like there was nothing else to do if the president was on. Which makes me think of a Jeff Foxworthy joke, because Jeff Foxworthy joked about it and said, if the president was on, your night was shot. You know, you were going to miss Flipper or whatever TV show you were wanting to see because it wasn't coming on later, you know. But anyway, so Kennedy pretty easily wins the 1960 election. Well, I shouldn't say easily, because it really was a close election, but a lot of people say that he had it in the bag anyway. All right, so here's where trouble comes up, and I feel really bad for Kennedy because he was a young, energetic president. A lot of people thought that his young energy was going to bring on just more good times, that it was very much reminiscent of King Arthur and the Knight's Tale, that it was just going to be this fairy tale time while he's in office, that only good things are going to happen. But sadly enough, things turned pretty quickly for Kennedy in the early 1960s. So we do know before Kennedy comes in office, 1959, we're going to back it up a little bit. 1959, Cuba is experiencing a revolution. Fidel Castro comes in, takes over, and Cuba becomes communist. Well, if you remember back to the Spanish-American War, we helped the Cubans fight for their independence. So we are taking this very personally, that our next door neighbor is now turned communist on us. So we're definitely not going to let this go down without us sticking our nose in their business, because according to the Platt and James Amendment, we can do that, right? So anyway, the biggest thing is we know that everybody is watching. Specifically, the Soviet Union's watching. So we want to make sure that the Soviet Union feels like we're not telling them they can't be communist. And because we know that they're going to try and step and put their nose in it if they feel like we are being too pushy about it with Cuba. So we think the better option is to do things quietly. So here's what happens. This one's on it says Cuban Revolution. I'm sorry, you can't see it really well on my screen, but anyway. So here's what happens. We have Cuban rebels that come into the United States, and we arm them, we give them supplies, give them weapons, and we send them back to Cuba, and we're like, hey, you guys go overthrow Castro, get him out of office, and everything go back to being, how it was, right? So anyway, and of course we're concerned about this for many reasons. One, Cuba is an ally, or was anyway, before they fell to the dark side. Number two, they're only 90 miles away from Florida, so they are a very close next door neighbor. Number three, we do not want to see anybody, especially that close, fall to communism, and especially because it could, and I don't know if you'd say this is party 3 or 4, we'll say it's 4. We definitely do not want to see the Soviet Union gaining any more allies during this, because we know that if they do stay communist, the Soviet Union's going to act like Big Brother and come put their arm around them and say, hey, what do you need? We're going to be besties now that you're communist, right? We're going to support one another, lean on one another. And it'll definitely be kind of a stab to us that we have lost an ally, especially that close. All we've done for Cuba, Spanish-American War, yada, 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 you get it, okay? All right, anyway, so we've got that mess currently going on, and it ends up leading to what we call the Bay of Pigs incident. So the Bay of Pigs incident is where these Cuban rebels that we have trained and given supplies to, they go to Cuba. So again, we're trying to keep it hush-hush that we've had anything to do with these Cuban rebels going back and trying to take back control. Well, Fidel Castro and his guys just mow over these Cuban rebels, take them all out. They immediately start pointing fingers that the United States is trying to step in. The Soviet Union comes in and is like, no, don't let the United States push you around. And so it blows up in our faces. It blows up in our faces pretty badly. Of course, it's on every newspaper. That's everywhere. Even Life magazine, if you've got your PowerPoint pulled up, it even shows you on Life magazine. It talks about the Bay of Pigs incident, how badly it blew up in our faces. The Soviet Union now officially tells JFK not to intervene with Cuba. They're communists, leave them alone. You shouldn't try and you shouldn't have tried to intervene in the first place. So it's pretty miserable what happens, and embarrassing. So now that we officially have a communist next door neighbor, and that communist next door neighbor is going to align themselves and have a new allyship with the Soviet Union, you know, things just aren't looking so good right now. Keep that in mind, because we're actually going to flip over to what's happening in Europe before we come right back, okay? Alright, so the last time we talked about what was happening in Europe is when the Soviet Union had pretty much told us that they're not going to hand over their part of Berlin, they're not going to hand over their part of Germany, there's going to be 2 Berlins, 2 Germanys, you know, East and West, and that's how it's going to stay, because the Soviet Union wants there to be a division. It doesn't want to see Germany ever become strong again. It wants them to pay physically, politically, socially, emotionally. It wants them to pay for what happened during World War I and World War II. You know, it's just all about revenge for them. So to make sure that there is an actual division, they start building what is the Berlin Wall. Now the Berlin Wall is now a physical barrier that is now being built to show a separation between essentially communism and democracy, and it's really sad. And this Berlin Wall goes up and stays up for 30 years. 30 years. And so we pretty much don't say that the Cold War is over until the Berlin Wall comes down. 1989, 1990. So the Berlin Wall goes up, and it's really sad because a lot of families are separated for those 30 years. And there's like a mad rush of people trying to get from east to west before the wall goes up. It's really crazy. Again, a lot of countries in the Western Hemisphere refuse to acknowledge that there's 2 Germanys, because that's not what we intended to do. But anyway, remember, this is what Winston Churchill called the Iron Curtain. Well, now we see a physical Iron Curtain that is now dividing Communist East and Democratic West. So it's sad to see, but the Berlin Wall goes up and stays up for 30 years. Now, I'm actually going to hit the pause button, and we'll get into the Cuban Missile Crisis tomorrow. Well, that's almost the end, but I'm going to wait. Okay, we'll talk about Cuban Missile Crisis tomorrow, because I've already gone a little bit longer than I meant to. So, stop there. We'll finish tomorrow with that at the beginning of your video, and then I will give you the next page of notes as well. Alright, bye for today.